What is the purpose of a torque link on an oleo strut? To keep the wheel in alignment and prevent the piston from coming out of the cylinder. A landing gear shock strut should be inflated with what gas? Nitrogen or dry air. What conditions should a mechanic look for during a regular inspection of the exposed piston section of a landing gear? Cleanliness, evidence of damage, and proper extension. What prevents air from leaking out between the two halves of split wheel assembly? An O-ring or a rubber packing between two assemblies. Why are fusible plugs installed on some aircraft wheels? To release the pressure generated by heat buildup before a tire blows. What safety precaution must be taken when removing a wheel from an axle or when disassembling a wheel? Verify that the tire is completely deflated before removing a wheel from an axle or before wheel disassembly. What are the visible signs of excessive heating on a wheel bearing? The bearing surfaces show discoloration. How are the pilot's nose wheel steering commands transmitted to the steering control unit of a large aircraft? Steering signals may be transmitted mechanically, electrically, or hydraulically. How is the nose wheel steering mechanism usually actuated on a small aircraft? By means of a mechanical linkage connected to the rudder pedals. What is the name of the unit that prevents a nose wheel from vibrating or oscillating? A shimmy damper. What are the most common sources of power used to extend and retract landing gear? Hydraulic pressure and electric motor. At what times should a gear retraction check be performed? During annual or other inspections and following a hard landing. What mechanism ensures that a nose wheel is not turned as it retracts into its wheel well? Internal centering cams in the strut or an external track. Name several types of brake actuating systems. Independent master cylinders, boosted brakes, and power control brakes. What is the function of an anti-skid system? Anti-skid systems allow large aircraft to achieve maximum braking effectiveness without allowing wheels to skid or lock. What is the purpose of a debooster? To reduce hydraulic system high pressure to a lower value for more satisfactory brake action. Describe two methods of bleeding brakes. A pressure pod can be attached to the bleeder valve and fluid forced back towards the master cylinder and/or reservoir, or the master cylinder can be used for forcing fluid from the reservoir to the brakes. Before a brake system can be inspected for leaks, what action must be accomplished? Pressure must be applied to the system. What maintenance function has the greatest impact on tire service life? Ensuring that the tires are properly inflated. What effect does underinflation have on aircraft tires? Internal heat damage, possibly leading to premature tire failure and more tread wear on the shoulders than in the center. What takes up the shock of the landing impact in an oleo shock strut? The meter transfer of oil from one compartment to another inside the shock strut. How is the correct amount of air in an oleo shock strut determined? By the amount the strut extends out of the cylinder when the weight of the aircraft is on it. How does an anti-skid brake system keep the wheels of an aircraft from skidding on a wet runway? The anti-skid system monitors the rate of deceleration of the wheels. If any wheel slows down faster than it should, as it would at the beginning of a skid, the pressure on the brake in that wheel is released until the wheel stops decelerating, then the pressure is reapplied. Where may the instructions for greasing a retractable landing gear on an aircraft be found? In the Aircraft Maintenance Manual. Where may a list of the approved lubricants for greasing an aircraft retractable landing gear be found? In the Aircraft Maintenance Manual. Where can you find safety precautions for jacking an aircraft for retractable landing gear inspection and maintenance? In the Aircraft Maintenance Manual. What is the purpose of the centering cam in a nose wheel shock strut? The centering cam forces the nose wheel straight back with the strut before it is retracted into the nose wheel well. How does a shimmy damper keep a nose wheel from shimmying? It acts as a small hydraulic shock absorber between the piston and the cylinder of the nose wheel shock strut. Where can you find the specifications for the type of fluid used to service an aircraft landing gear shock strut? On the nameplate on the strut. What absorbs the initial landing impact in an oleo shock strut? The transfer of oil from one component to another through a metered orifice. What absorbs the taxi shocks in an oleo shock strut? The compressed air or nitrogen. How much oil should be put into an oleo shock strut? With the strut completely deflated, fill it to the level of the filler plug. How much air or nitrogen should be put into an oleo shock strut? With the strut serviced with fluid and the filler plug in place and the weight of the aircraft on the strut, put in enough air nitrogen to extend the piston to the height specified in the aircraft maintenance manual. What is the purpose of using an exerciser jack when servicing a shock strut with fluid? The jack moves the piston up and down inside the cylinder to work all of the air out of the oil to be sure that the proper amount of oil is in the strut. Where can you find a list of brake fluids approved for the aircraft? In the aircraft service manual. What is used to flush brake lines and cylinders if the system uses vegetables-based fluid? Alcohol. What is used to flush brake lines and cylinders if the system uses mineral-based fluid? Naphtha, Varsol, or Stoddard solvent. How do you measure the amount of brake lining wear on single-disc brakes? Measure the clearance between the disc and the inboard side of the brake housing with the brakes applied. What is the purpose of the debooster in a hydraulic power brake system? The debooster decreases the pressure and increases the volume of fluid going to the brakes. What should be done to hydraulic brakes when the pedal has a spongy feel? The brakes should be bled of this air. What is the purpose of the compensator port in the master cylinder of the aircraft brakes? This prevents pressure from building up in the brake lines and causing the brakes to drag. What is the purpose of the shuttle valve in the brake system of an aircraft using hydraulic power brakes? The shuttle valve is an automatic transfer valve. It allows the brakes to be operated by hydraulic system pressure under all normal conditions. When removing a wheel from an aircraft to change the tire, when should the tire be deflated? After the aircraft is on jacks but before the axle nut is loosened. What should be used to deflate high-pressure tires? A deflator cap screwed onto the tire valve to allow the air to escape through the hole in the side of the cap and not in the face of the mechanic. Where are cracks most likely to form in an aircraft wheel? In the bead seat area. What type of inspection should be used to inspect the bead seat area of a wheel for cracks? Eddy current inspection. What is meant by the ply rating of a tire? The number of plies of cotton fabric needed to produce the same strength as the actual plies in the tire. What is the function of the bead in a tire? The bead is made of high-strength carbon steel wire bundles and used to provide the strength and stiffness where the tire mounts on the wheel. Is it proper to use a tube in a tubeless tire? No, the inner liner of a tubeless tire is rough and it can chafe the tube and normal operation. What is the function of the grooves cut into the tread of a tire? The grooves produce the optimum traction with the runway surface. What is the most widely used tread pattern for modern airplane tire? A series of a straight groove around the periphery of the tire. How should new aircraft tires be stored? In a dark, cool location away from electrical motors or battery chargers. Is it best to store new tires vertically or horizontally? Vertically. What is the most important maintenance procedure for aircraft tires? Keep them properly inflated. What should be used to remove oil from a tire? mild soap and warm water. Where do you find the proper inflation pressure for an aircraft tire? In the aircraft service manual. Why should aircraft tire pressure be rechecked after it has been installed for about 24 hours with no load applied? The tire will stretch and the pressure will drop. The proper pressure must be restored. What causes an aircraft tire to wear more on the shoulders than in the center of the tread? Operating the tire in an underinflated condition. What causes an aircraft tire to wear more in the center of the tread than on the shoulders? Operating the tire in an overinflated condition. What should be done to an aircraft tire if the sidewalls are weather-checked enough to expose the cord? The tire should be scrapped. Why is it important that some aircraft with retractable landing gear be given a retraction test after new or retreated tires are installed? It is possible in some aircraft a new retreated tire can be different enough in size from a previous tire that it could lock up in the wheel well when the landing gear is retracted. What safety procedure should be followed when inflating a tire on a large aircraft wheel for the first time after it has been replaced? Put the wheel in a safety cage when it is being inflated because of the danger if the through bolts should fail. What should be done with a tire that was on a wheel which was overheated enough to melt the fusible plug in the wheel? The tire should be scrapped. Where can you find the correct inflation pressure for the tires on an aircraft? In the aircraft service manual. What is the purpose of the compensator port in the master cylinder of aircraft brakes? It opens the brake reservoir to the wheel cylinders when the brakes are off. This prevents pressure from building up in the brake lines and causing the brakes to drag. Now let's move to Chapter 10, Position and Warning Systems. 33 terms. What is the source of the anti-skid warning system signal? What system is used to indicate battery over temperature? A warning light. What is a Mach warning system? It provides an oral warning after an aircraft speed limits have been exceeded. What unit in an anti-skid system generates the anti-skid warning signal? The control unit. How is a pilot alerted that an anti-skid system has automatically returned to a manual brake system? By a warning light. What is the significance of an anti-skid warning? The system is off or has failed. By what usual means does the stall warning system in a small aircraft alert the pilot of an impending stall? An audible alert and/or warning light. What devices are used to provide warnings for a retractable landing gear system? A horn or other oral device and a red warning light or lights. How can a pilot determine that the landing gear is down and locked? A green light or lights and/or other type of visual indicator. Name at least 2 conditions that would activate a takeoff configuration warning system in a jet transport aircraft. Incorrect leading or trailing edge flap position, stabilizer position, or speed brake not stowed. What landing gear positions must be indicated by regulations? Down and locked and up and locked. Under what conditions will a landing gear oral sound? When the throttle is retarded and the landing gear is not down and locked. How does a takeoff configuration warning differ from a landing gear warning? Takeoff warnings are usually in intermittent horns while landing gear warnings are steady. What is the function of a Mach airspeed warning systems? To alert the pilot that the never exceed airspeed limit has been reached or exceeded. What systems are commonly used to activate the landing gear warning systems? The throttles and the wing flaps. Why do airplanes with bleed air anti-icing of the wing leading edge have an anti-ice overheat light? To indicate an over-temperature condition, usually as a result of a break in the bleed air ducts. What warning may be required when a nickel-cadmium battery is installed in an aircraft? A battery temperature monitoring system. At what time would a check of a landing gear warning system normally be made? During a landing gear retraction test. What is the purpose of an annunciator system in an aircraft? To show by means of a warning light that some system parameter requires attention by the flight crew. If an aircraft with retractable landing gear has only one green light to indicate the gear is down and locked, how will the switches be connected, in series or in parallel? In series. Where would you locate the procedures for checking and adjusting the landing gear switches? In the aircraft manufacturer's manual. What is the usual means for alerting the crew of a jet transport that the cabin door are not properly closed? A warning light. Why are transport category aircraft equipped with a master caution and warning system? To alert the crew that a malfunction has occurred and corrective action may be required. What is an annunciator panel in an aircraft? A single location that contains all of the warning and condition lights for the aircraft. Which device in an anti-skid brake system would likely cause the brakes to fail to release when a skid developed? A malfunction anti-skid valve. Where are the skid detectors located in an anti-skid brake system? In the center of the wheel hub. What condition could cause a takeoff warning system to actuate? The takeoff warning system gives an oral warning when the power lever is advanced for takeoff if the flight controls for the stabilizer, the flaps, and the speed brakes are in an unsafe condition for takeoff. Where is the landing gear safety switch normally located? On one of the landing gear shock struts, so the switch is actuated when the weight of the aircraft is on the landing gear. What is a squat switch and where is located? A landing gear safety switch that energizes a circuit to prevent the landing gear retraction handle from being moved to the retract position when weight is on the landing gear. It is located in the torsion links of one of the main landing gears. What kind of device is normally used as a sensor to detect the condition of a retractable landing gear? A precision micro switch. What type of system is used to indicate the position of the wing flaps? Usually a resistance type remote indicating system such as the DC cell-SIN system. What information is shown by the wing flap position indicator? The number of degrees the flaps are lowered. What would cause the warning horn to sound when the throttles are pulled back, reducing the engine power for landing? The warning horn will sound if any of the landing gears are not down and locked. What is indicated by a red light in the landing gear position indication portion of the annunciator panel? The red light indicates that the landing gear is not in a safe condition for landing. What information is given to a pilot to indicate that all of the landing gears are down and locked? 3 green lights are used on most aircraft to indicate that all 3 landing gears are down and locked. What is the most likely cause of a landing gear warning system failing to warn when the landing gear is not down and locked? A faulty or misadjusted micro switch. Chapter 11 Aircraft Instrument Systems. 70 terms. What is a tachometer instrument? It measures the crankshaft RPM. What type of test is required after replacement of components connected to a pitot static system? A leak test must be performed. When range markings are placed on an instrument glass, what precaution must be taken? The instrument glass must be marked by a slippage mark indication. A static check may be performed on a manifold pressure gauge by using what piece of information? Current atmospheric pressure. What aircraft instrument can be used to check a manifold pressure gauge for proper indication? The sensitive altimeter. Name several of the indication errors that may be found in altimeters. Scale errors, hysteresis, friction, and installation. What is the signal source in an electrical resistance type temperature indicating system? A temperature bulb or sensing element. What type of temperature sensing system is normally used to measure a turbine engine exhaust gas temperature? A thermocouple type system. What operating parameter is indicated by a tachometer? Engine RPM. What is the name of the effect that causes a gyro to respond to an applied force at a point 90 degrees further in the direction of rotation? Gyroscopic precession. What are the three sources of power used to drive a gyroscopic turn indicator? Air from a vacuum or pressure source or an electric motor. What are the two items that should be considered during inspection of a magnetic compass? 1. The fluid must be clear. 2. The housing must be full with no bubbles. 3. The car must be legible and the lower line intact. 4. The compass should be properly calibrated. In what way do magnetic fields generated by electrical equipment and steel parts in the airplane affect a magnetic compass? Stray magnetic fields deflect the compass from correct alignment with the Earth's magnetic field. Describe the basic operating concept of a synchro-type remote indicating system. A remote transmitter electrically signals a receiver inside the instrument. What aircraft instruments are connected to the pitot static system? Rate of climb, the altimeter and vertical speed indicator. Why should you avoid cleaning obstructions from the sensing holes in a pitot static system with a tool? The holes are aerodynamically critical. After components in a pitot static system have been replaced, what tests or inspections are required? The static system leak test specified by FAR 91.411. What quantity is accurately measured by a capacitance-type fuel quantity indicating system? The mass of the fuel. Who is authorized to apply the range markings to an instrument dial face? The manufacturer or a certificated instrument repair station. What is the purpose of a slippage mark on an instrument glass? To indicate if the glass has moved, which could cause incorrect range markings on an instrument that has the range markings painted on the glass. What references should be consulted to determine the proper range markings for aircraft instruments? The Aircraft Maintenance Manual, Aircraft Flight Manual, Type Certificate Data Sheets or Aircraft Specifications. What is the meaning of a yellow arc on an aircraft instrument? A caution or limited flight operations range. What is the reason for swinging a compass and how is it accomplished? To compensate for deviations caused by magnetic fields in the aircraft by adjusting the compensating magnets. What type of repairs or alterations can a certificated A&P mechanic make to aircraft instruments? None. All repairs and alterations must be made by the instrument manufacturer or by an FAA-approved repair station certificated for the particular instrument. What is the significance of a red radial line on the dial of an aircraft instrument? A red radial line marks a never exceed condition. What is the significance of a green arc on the dial of an aircraft instrument? A green arc indicates the normal range of operation. What is the significance of a yellow arc on the dial of an aircraft instrument? Caution range of operation. What is the significance of a white arc on the dial of an airspeed indicator? A white arc on an airspeed indicator indicates the airspeeds at which the flaps may be lowered. What is used to warn a mechanic that the glass on an aircraft instrument that contains the range marks has slipped? A white slippage mark that extends across the lower part of the instrument cover glass and the instrument case bezel shows whether or not the glass has slipped. Why are many of the electrical instruments mounted in steel case? A steel case concentrates the flux produced by magnets in the instrument and keeps it from affecting other nearby instrument. Why must an aircraft instrument panel be electrically bonded to the primary aircraft structure? The bounding straps carry the return current from the instruments into the aircraft structure. What is the maximum amount of leakage that is allowed when checking the static system of an aircraft that is operated under instrument flight rules? For an unpressurized aircraft, it must not leak more than 100 feet in 1 minute. For a pressurized aircraft, it must not leak more than 2% in 1 minute. Why must the length of the thermocouple leads not be altered when installing a cylinder head temperature indicator? The resistance of the thermocouple and its leads must be kept at the value specified for the indicator. What should a manifold pressure gauge read when the engine is not operating? It should read the existing barometric pressure. What is the difference between a 2 minutes and a 4 minutes turn and slip indicator? A 2-minute turn indicator gives a 1 needle width deflection for a standard rate of turn. A 4 minutes turn indicator has doghouse-shaped marks located 2 needle widths away from the center mark. What is the difference between a turn and slip indicator and a turn coordinator? A turn and slip indicator is sensitive about only the yaw axis of the aircraft. A turn coordinator uses a canted gyro which makes it sensitive about both the roll and yaw axes. Why is a dual tachometer used on a single-engine helicopter? When the needles are married, the clutch is not slipping and the rotor is solidly engaged to the engine. In what units is the tachometer used on a turbine engine calibrated? In percentage of the takeoff RPM. What kind of system is used to measure the exhaust gas temperature of a turbine engine? An averaging system made up of a series of thermocouples arranged around the inside of the exhaust duct of the engine. What would likely cause the needle of an electrical oil temperature gauge to pick on the high side of the instrument dial? There is probably an open in the bulb circuit that is causing the instrument to see an infinite resistance. What is used as a flow meter for most of the small horizontally opposed fuel-injected aircraft engines? A pressure gauge that measures the pressure drop across the injector nozzles. What two sources of power are used to operate the gyro instruments in an aircraft? They may be air-operated either by suction or pressure, or they may be electrically operated. What error is corrected when an aircraft compass is swung? Deviation error. What fluid is used in an aircraft magnetic compass? A special water-clear fluid similar to kerosene. What is the maximum amount of deviation error allowed when a magnetic compass is installed in an aircraft? 10 degrees. Where on an airport is a compass rose located? At a location where there is little traffic and the area is free from magnetic interference caused by electrical power lines or buried pipes. What are the gyroscopic instruments that are connected to the low-pressure pneumatic system of an aircraft? Heading indicator, attitude indicator, and turn and slip indicator. What device is used with a wet pump vacuum system to prevent oil from getting into the de-icer boots? An oil separator. What are two types of filters used with a pressure system for gyros? A pump inlet filter and an inline filter. What type of filter is used with a vacuum system for gyros? A central air filter. What two types of pumps are used in the low-pressure pneumatic system? A dry type and a wet type air pump. What are the vanes of a wet type air pump made of? Steel. What are the vanes of a dry type air pump made of? Carbon. How are the vanes of a wet type air pump lubricated? With engine oil directed into the pump through a small hole in the base of the pump. Why is it important to use the correct gasket when replacing a wet type air pump? The gasket must have a hole through which the pump lubricating oil can flow. Why do dry type air pumps not need to be lubricated? The special carbon material of which the vanes are made wears away in microscopic amounts to provide the needed lubrication. What must be done to the gyro pressure system if a dry type air pump fails? All of the filters must be replaced to prevent any debris from the pump vanes getting into the gyro instruments. Who is authorized to perform the altimeter tests to determine the accuracy of the altimeter? The manufacturer of the aircraft on which the tests are conducted, or a certificated repair station properly equipped and authorized to perform the test. Where are the requirements for the altimeter system test found? 14 CFR Part 43 Appendix E. How often should an altimeter be checked if it is installed in an aircraft used in IFR flight? Every 24 calendar months. How much difference is allowed between the altitude indication on the automatic pressure altitude reporting equipment and that on the altimeter? 125 feet. To what altitude must altimeters be tested? To the highest altitude the aircraft will be flow on IFR flight. What record must be made of a test of an altimeter? The aircraft permanent maintenance record must show the date, the maximum altitude to which the altimeter was tested, and the name of the person approving the aircraft for return to service after the test. Do the tests described in 14 CFR Part 43 Appendix E apply to the altimeters installed in all certificated aircraft? No, only those operated under instrument flight rules in controlled airspace. To what avionic equipment is the output from an encoding altimeter connected? The ATC transponder. What is the allowable difference between the surveyed elevation of the airport and the indication on the altimeter when it is set to the local altimeter setting? 75 feet. Who is authorized to conduct a static system test specified in 14 CFR 91.411? A certificated mechanic holding an airframe rating. How much leakage is allowed in the static system of an unpressurized aircraft? With a pressure differential of 1 inch of mercury, the system must not show a loss of indicated altitude of more than 100 feet in 1 minute. How much leakage is allowed in the static system of a pressurized aircraft? The system must not show a loss of indicated altitude of more than 2% of the equivalent altitude of the maximum cabin differential pressure or 100 feet, whichever is the greater, in 1 minute. What indication on the altimeter shows that the pressure inside the static system has been decreased by 1 inch of mercury? The altimeter will show an increase of approximately 1,000 feet. When should a static system leak check be performed? Anytime the static system has been opened. What should be done to the static port that is not being used to conduct the leak test? It should be tapered over in such a way that the tape cannot be overlooked or forgotten when the test is completed. Where can a mechanic find the range markings that are required on the instruments in a particular aircraft? In the type certificate data sheets for the aircraft. Let's move to Chapter 12 Aircraft Avionics Systems. 57 terms. What are the basic components of a radio communication system? A microphone, transmitting and receiving antennas, receiver and speaker or headphones. What frequency range is used by the most modern voice communication systems? The VHF band. What does the term ADF stand for? Airborne direction finding. What is the function of VOR equipment? Navigation. Name the components of a typical airborne VOR navigation system. A receiver, antennas, frequency selector and visual display indicator. What does DME stand for? Distance measuring equipment. At what interval must an ATC transponder system be certified? Every 24 calendar months. Why are 2 antennas usually required for an ILS system? The localizer and glide slope signals are transmitted on different frequencies. What information does the glide slope beam provide? Vertical guidance to enable the aircraft to maintain the correct descent angle. What is the power source for an ALT? An internal battery. Describe one method of monitoring the signal output during an L test. Tune a VHF communications receiver to 121.5 mkz. How would you determine if the batteries in an ALT are due for recharge or replacement? By looking for an expiration date for charge or replacement on the battery and/or in the aircraft maintenance records. At what time is a test of an installed ALT permitted? During the first 5 minutes after the hours and for no more than 3 sweeps. Where on the aircraft would you expect to find a DME antenna? Generally on the bottom of the fuselage in a location that isn't blocked by the wing during turns. Describe the shape and location of a transponder antenna. Either a short blade or a short wire with a ball end located on the bottom of the fuselage. Name the basic components of an autopilot system. Gyros, servos, a controller and an amplifier or computer. What are the sensing elements of an autopilot system? Attitude, directional and turning gyros and an altitude sensor. What is the function of the servos in an autopilot system? The servos actuate the flight controls. What is the purpose of a bonding jumper from a radio shock mount to the airframe? To provide a low impedance ground return. Describe the procedure used to route coaxial cable from an antenna to a receiver. The cable should be supported every 2 feet. Bonds should be 10 times the cable diameter and it should be routed separately from other wires. On what 2 frequencies does the emergency locator transmitter operate? 121.5 and 243.0 MHz. Where is the L transmitter normally located on an aircraft? In the tail of the aircraft or as far aft as possible, so will be least likely to be damaged in a crash. How often should L batteries be replaced or recharged? When the transmitter has been in use for more than 1 cumulative hour or when 50% of their useful life or charge has expired. How often must LTs be inspected for proper installation, battery corrosion, operation of the controls and sensors, and the presence of the radiated signal? Every 12 calendar months. What causes an L to actuate? An inertia switch that detects an impact parallel to the longitudinal axis of the aircraft as would occur in a crash. What kind of conductor is used to connect a VHF or UHF antenna to receiver or transmitter? Coaxial cable. What is a coaxial cable? A type of 2-conductor electrical cable in which the center conductor is encased in insulation inside a braided shield that serves as the outer conductor. How can you determine the proper coaxial cable and connectors to use in an aircraft radio installation? Refer to the radio installation instructions for the correct part number for the cable and connectors. What precautions should be taken when installing coaxial cable between a radio transmitter and its antenna? The routing should be as direct as possible, there should be no sharp bends in the coax, and it should be kept away from heat that could soften the insulation. What is a BNC connector? A coaxial cable connector that is connected by inserting the guide pins on the male connector into slots in the female connector and twisting the connector 1/4 turn. On what frequency is the marker beacon signal transmitted? 75 MHz. What do the 3 marker beacon lights indicate to the pilot? The blue light indicates passage over the outer marker in an ILS approach, the amber light indicates passage over the middle marker, and the white light indicates passage over any other location specified on the instrument approach. What precautions should be observed when working around the aircraft radar? Aircraft radar should never be operated when there are people or buildings within 100 yards of the antenna sweep, and it must not be operated when the aircraft is being fueled or defueled. What 3 components of an instrument landing system are installed in an aircraft? The receivers for the localizer, the glide slope, and the marker beacons. Why is it important that all shock-mounted electronic equipment be connected to the aircraft structure with a bounding braid? The bounding braid is used to carry the return current from the equipment into the aircraft structure. What is the preferred location for a VOR antenna on an airplane? On top of the aircraft, along the centerline on the fuselage. Which component of the instrument landing system shares the antenna with the VOR? The ILS localizer. What kind of antenna is used for VHF communications? A vertically polarized whip antenna. What kind of antenna is used for the ATC transponder? A UHF step antenna. What is the preferred location for the ATC transponder antenna? On the centerline of the belly of the aircraft, as far from any other antenna as is practical. What two types of antenna are used with most ADF receivers? A directional loop antenna and a non-directional sense antenna. Why is it necessary to install a doubler on the inside of the aircraft skin when antenna is mounted on the skin? The doubler reinforces the skin so wind loads on the antenna will not cause the skin to flex and crack. What is the basic purpose of an autopilot? It frees the human pilot from continuously having to fly the aircraft and flies with a high degree of precision. What are the basic subsystems of an automatic flight control system? Command, error sensing, correction, and follow-up. What type of device is normally used in the error sensing subsystem? Gyros. What are three types of servos that are used in the correction subsystem? Hydraulic, pneumatic, and electric. What is the purpose of the follow-up subsystem in an autopilot? It stops the control movement when the surface has deflated the proper amount for the signal sent by the error sensor. Is a certificated airframe mechanic allowed to adjust a communications transmitter? No, this requires a license issued by the Federal Communications Commission. Which frequency band is used for most aircraft communications? The VHF band, between 30 and 300 MHz. In which frequency band does the VOR equipment operate? In the VHF band, between 108.0 and 117.95 MHz. In what frequency band does the DME equipment operate? In the UHF band, between 962 and 1024 MHz and between 1151 and 1213 MHz. Which frequency band is used for long-range communications from an aircraft? The high-frequency band. What is meant by S-transceiver? It is a piece of radio communications equipment in which all of the circuit for the receiver and the transmitter are contained in one housing. Is a certificated airframe mechanic allowed to adjust a communications transfer? No, this requires a license issued by the Federal Communications Commission. What is the preferred location for a DME antenna? Along the centerline of the belly of the aircraft, as far from any other antenna as is practical. What is meant by a transceiver? A piece of radio communications equipment in which all of the circuits for the receiver and the transmitter are contained in one housing. Why is it important that all shock-mounted electronic equipment be connected to the aircraft structure with a bounding braid? The bounding braid is used to carry the return current from the equipment into the aircraft structure. Chapter 13 Airframe Ice and Rain Control. 29. What controls the temperature in a thermal anti-icing system? Hot and cold air are mixed. What are the sources of heat for a thermal anti-icing system? Bleed air from the compressor section of a turbine engine, engine exhaust heat exchangers and combustion heaters. What prevents overheating of the leading edges of a thermal anti-ice system operated by engine bleed air? Overheat sensors signal the anti-icing valves to close and shut off the hot air. What happens to the hot air used by thermal anti-ice system after it has heated the surface? The air is dumped overboard. Why is it necessary to provide overheat protection for anti-icing systems that use turbine engine bleed air? The air is hot enough to cause damage to the aircraft structure. What are the effects of arcing of an electrically heated windshield? Localized overheating and damage to the windshield. Can the operation of an electrically heated pitot tube be checked with the aircraft's ammeter, and if so, how? Yes, turn the pitot heater on and observe the deflection of the ammeter needle. Describe several potential problems associated with electrically heated windshields. Arcing, delamination, scratches, and discoloration. Why do some pneumatic de-icer boot systems have an electrically operated timer? To automatically cycle the boots, provide the proper rest time, and then recycle the boots. What are the two common methods of inflating pneumatic de-icer boots? Bleed air from a turbine engine or the exhaust from an engine-driven vacuum pump. What procedure is used to hold de-icer boots flat with the airfoil surface during flight? Suction is applied to the boots. Why do some de-icer boot systems incorporate an oil separator? If a wet pump system is used, the oil must be removed before it reaches the boots because oil damages the rubber. What methods are used to attach a de-icer boot to the leading edges of the wing and tail surfaces? Adhesives, fairing strips and screws, or a combination of both. What important steps should be taken prior to making a cold patch repair to a de-icer boot? Consult the manufacturer's service manual and follow the repair instructions explicitly. Describe the methods commonly used to remove rain from a windshield. Windshield wipers, a blast of air, or chemical rain repellent. What power sources are used to operate windshield wipers? Electricity or hydraulic pressure. Name two problems associated with in-flight operation of aircraft windshield wipers. Insufficient blade pressure caused by aerodynamic forces and failure to oscillate fast enough. Describe the operation of a pneumatic rain removal system. A high-velocity air blast prevents the rain from reaching the surface of the windshield. What are the effects of spraying rain repellent on a dry windshield? It smears and streaks, which reduces visibility, and it is hard to remove when dry. Where would you find information on the acceptable limits of windshield delamination? In reference material provided by the manufacturer. How is ice kept from forming on the pilot tube of an airplane? Pitot tubes are heated by electric current flowing through heater element built into them. How can you tell, on a pre-flight inspection, that the pilot heater is operating? Turn it on for about a minute and then on the walk-around inspection, feel it to see that it is warm. Where can you find the correct part number for the electrically heated pitot head used on an aircraft? In the illustrated parts manual for the aircraft. If the pitot head includes ports for the static air system, what must be done after the head is replaced? A static system leak test must be performed and the results recorded in the aircraft maintenance records. Why is it important that ice not be allowed to build up on airplane wings in flight? Ice distorts the shape of the airfoil and destroys the aerodynamic lift. How does a thermal anti-icing system operated? Hot compressor bleed air is ducted into a special chamber between a double skin in the leading edge of the wing. What is used to remove frost from an aircraft before flight? A mixture of isopropyl alcohol and ethylene glycol. How is carburetor ice prevented in the engines of the smaller aircraft? Heated air is directed into the carburetor. How are rubber de-icer boots attached to the leading edges of aircraft wings and tail surfaces? Some of them are attached with machine screws and rivets, others are bonded to the surface with an adhesive. What keeps an electrically heated windshield from overheating? Heat sensors built into the windshield control the current that is used to heat the windshield. Are pneumatic deicer boots operated before ice form or after it has formed? Pneumatic deicer boots are not operated until ice has formed over them. Where does the air come from to operate the pneumatic deicer boots on a reciprocating engine-powered airplane? From the discharge side, the air pump used to operate the gyro instruments. What is meant by a wet vacuum pump? It is a vacuum pump that uses engine oil to lubricate its steel vanes. What is the purpose of the oil separator in a deicer system? Oil separators are used with wet vacuum pumps to remove the lubricating oil from the discharge air before this air is used in the deicer boots. How are rubber deicer boots cleaned? How is ice prevented from forming on the windshield? How are rubber deicer boots cleaned? How are rubber deicer boots cleaned? By washing them with mild soap and water. How is ice prevented from forming on the windshield of modern jet transport airplanes?